Do you know that specific bone-deep exhaustion that comes from caring for someone who is slowly disappearing before your eyes? It's a weariness that seeps into your soul, leaving you hollowed out, a ghost in your own home. For 6 months, that was my entire world. And in that hollow space, something dark and insidious found room to grow. My story isn't about a monster who appeared overnight. It's about how a good man, a quiet father, can become lost in the fog of grief and loneliness and drag his own daughter into the darkness with him. Welcome to Stoic Love. We believe that understanding the most difficult stories is the first step toward healing and prevention. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, because shining a light on these hidden truths is the only way to fight the darkness. My name is Leah Miller. I'm 22 years old, and I work as a certified nursing assistant at a long-term care facility in a tired, working-class suburb of Pittsburgh. My life is a relentless cycle of changing bedpans, spoon-feeding pureed meals to the elderly, and holding the hands of people taking their last breaths. I come home from a 12-hour shift that smells of antiseptic and quiet despair, only to walk into a house that feels exactly the same. For the past 6 months, my life has been held together by the thinnest of threads. My mother, Susan, has late-stage multiple sclerosis. The disease has been a cruel, unhurried thief, stealing her mobility, her speech, her very essence, piece by agonizing piece. She now lives in a hospital bed in our dining room, a silent prisoner in her own body. The doctors have stopped talking about recovery and started talking about comfort. My job, my entire existence, has become about managing her comfort, while my own has become a distant memory. My dad, Frank, was laid off from the local steel mill last year, the same mill where his own father had worked for 40 years. The layoff didn't just take his job, it took his identity. He's always been a quiet man, but now he moves through our small, cramped house like a shadow, his silence thick with a grief and a uselessness he can't put into words. I used to think he was just overwhelmed by Mom's illness, the same way I was. But I was wrong. It was so much more than that. That Friday afternoon, I had a rare day off. The exhaustion was so profound it felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. I didn't even have the energy to climb the stairs to my room. I collapsed onto the living room couch, the worn floral pattern scratchy against my skin. I flicked on the television, the mindless chatter of a game show filling the quiet house. I only meant to rest my eyes for a second. That second bled into hours. You have no control over your body when you're asleep. You don't know that your worn-out tank top has ridden up, exposing the soft skin of your stomach, or that your shorts have shifted, revealing the full length of your thighs. You are utterly vulnerable, lost in a world of dreams. But someone else is always awake. Someone else sees. When my eyes fluttered open that day, it wasn't the sound of the television that woke me. It was a feeling, the feeling of being watched. My dad was standing by the armchair across the room, just staring at me, not with anger, not with concern for his exhausted daughter. His expression was one of intense, unnerving focus, like an art historian studying a painting for the first time, memorizing every line, every shadow. I didn't move. I kept my eyes half shut, my breathing even, pretending to be asleep as my heart hammered against my ribs. How long had he been standing there? 5 minutes? 10? A cold dread washed over me. That was the moment an invisible line was crossed. I lay there, feigning sleep, until the sheer weight of his gaze became unbearable. Then, with a quiet, deliberate movement, I swung my legs off the couch, pulled my shirt down, and walked upstairs to my room without a single word. I locked the door, my hands trembling. I told myself it was a fluke, a weird, awkward moment born from stress and grief. something we would both bury in the suffocating silence of our home. But I was wrong. It wasn't just a moment. It was the beginning. The rest of that evening was a master class in avoidance. I stayed in my room. He stayed downstairs, the sound of the television a low murmur. And Mom, she was in her bed in the dining room, the rhythmic hiss of her oxygen machine the only sound she could make, her eyes fixed on the ceiling as if she were already looking into another world. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just shocked to see me so exposed. Maybe he was just lost in thought. But the next morning, the shift that had started in the living room became terrifyingly real. As I was getting ready to leave for my shift, he came into the kitchen. Usually, our morning exchange was a series of grunts. This time, he smiled. A warm, genuine smile that didn't quite reach his haunted eyes. "Here," he said, his voice unusually soft. "You're working so hard. You probably need some gas money." He held out a hand, and in it were 2 crisp $100 bills. I stared at the money, then at him. This was more than he'd ever given me in my life. "Dad, that's way too much." "Don't worry about it," he cut me off, his tone calm and reassuring. "You deserve something nice for yourself." It didn't stop there. Over the next few days, his behavior transformed. He started buying me small, thoughtful things, a bottle of the expensive shampoo I liked, my favorite coffee from the local cafe. He'd ask how I slept, how my shift was. He even started making dinner some nights, simple things like spaghetti or grilled cheese, so I wouldn't have to cook when I got home late. On the surface, it was kind. It was the father I wished I'd had for years. But underneath the kindness, I could feel it, that same intense, lingering stare. It was in the way his eyes would follow me as I moved around the kitchen, the way he'd watch me a little too long as I ate. The moment on the couch had awakened something in him, and now he was feeding it with these small, unsettling acts of kindness. Recognizing the subtle shift from care to control is one of the most difficult challenges in any relationship. What do you think are the biggest red flags in this story so far? Share your insights in the comments below. Your awareness could help someone else listening right now. 3 days after the incident, I came home from a brutal shift well after midnight. The house was dark and silent. I assumed everyone was asleep. I tiptoed into the kitchen to grab a bottle of water, and my heart leaped into my throat. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table in the pitch dark. "Hey," he said softly, and I jumped, letting out a small gasp. "Couldn't sleep either." He looked exhausted, the faint light from the street lamp outside casting long shadows across his face. But in his eyes, I saw something else, something I hadn't really paid attention to before, a profound, crushing loneliness. "It's getting harder, Leah," he said, his voice rough with unshed tears as he stared at the worn linoleum floor. "Watching your mother fade away like this. Every night I'm scared she won't wake up in the morning, and I feel like a stranger in my own house, like a ghost." I didn't know what to say. In all my 22 years, I had never seen him so vulnerable. He had always been the stoic provider, the strong, silent foundation of our family. Seeing him crack was like watching a mountain crumble. He stood up and walked over to me. He didn't touch me, but he stood close enough for me to feel the heat coming off his body, close enough for me to smell the faint scent of stale coffee on his breath. "You've grown into such a beautiful woman, Leah," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't say it enough, but I'm so proud of everything you're doing." My heart skipped a beat. The words were meant to be fatherly, but the proximity, the intensity of his gaze, the raw vulnerability in his voice, it didn't feel like a father talking to a daughter. It felt like a man talking to a woman. It felt dangerous. I mumbled goodnight and fled to my room, my entire body shaking. Something was unfolding, a dark, complicated dance, and I was too tired, too lost, and too lonely myself to know the steps to stop it. It happened 2 nights later. That day at work had been hell. One of my favorite residents, a sweet old woman named Mrs. Gable, had passed away that morning. I spent most of my shift with her grieving family, offering tissues and empty platitudes, absorbing their sorrow until it felt like my own. I came home with a splitting headache and an ache in my soul. I barely glanced at my parents as I walked in, just dragged my exhausted body upstairs. I left my bedroom door cracked open, a habit born from years of needing to listen for my mother's calls in the night. I threw on a loose, oversized t-shirt and crawled into bed, craving the oblivion of sleep. I must have been asleep for less than half an hour when I heard a soft knock on the cracked open door. "Leah?" he whispered. "You awake?" I sat up slowly, my mind foggy, my first thought a jolt of panic that something had happened to Mom. "Yeah," I mumbled, rubbing my eyes. "Is everything okay?" He stepped inside before I could say more. He was still fully dressed in the clothes he'd worn that day, a pair of worn jeans and a flannel shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. I could see a faint tremor in his hands. "Can I sit down?" he asked. I just nodded, too tired to argue. He sat on the edge of my bed, not too close, but close enough that I could feel the tension radiating off him. The room was dim, lit only by the faint glow of the nightlight on my dresser. For a long, heavy moment, he just breathed. "I know this is going to sound strange," he finally said, his voice strained. "But I feel like I'm losing my mind, Leah." He ran a hand through his thinning hair, a nervous gesture I knew well. "Your mom, I love her. God, I do. But she hasn't really looked at me in months. I feel like I'm disappearing in this house, like I'm just a ghost walking around, paying the bills, feeling nothing." I stayed silent. What could I possibly say? I was barely surviving myself. "And you," he said, and he looked at me then, his gaze so intense it felt like it could burn. "You're the only light left in this house. You take care of her, you take care of this place, you even take care of me, and you don't even realize it." There was something broken in his voice, something that resonated with the broken parts of me, a part of me that had gone so long without being seen, without being told I mattered, felt a dangerous pull toward his words. The silence that followed was deafening. "I shouldn't be in here," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "but I haven't been able to sleep, not since the other day." My breath caught in my throat. He was talking about the couch. "You looked so peaceful," he continued, his eyes locked on mine. "So beautiful. And I know it's wrong, Leah. I know what I'm saying sounds insane, but that moment, seeing you like that, it changed something in me. It was the first thing I've felt in months. It made me feel alive again." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. My hands were frozen, clutching the blanket. I didn't know what to do. Scream? Cry? Tell him to get out. All I could do was sit there, suspended in a terrifying space between fear, confusion, and the desperate, aching desire to finally feel something other than exhaustion. "You can tell me to stop," he said, his voice low and persuasive. "You can tell me this is wrong, and I will walk out that door and never say another word about it. But I need you to know, I don't see you as just my daughter anymore. I see a woman, a strong, incredible woman that I've come to admire so much." That was the line. That was the sentence that shattered the fragile balance of our world. Something inside me cracked open. The girl who worked 12-hour shifts cleaning up after the sick and dying. The girl who had given up her friends, her youth, her entire life to care for a mother who no longer knew her name. The girl who hadn't been told she was beautiful in years. That girl just wanted to be held. So when he leaned in, not to kiss me, but close enough for me to feel his warm breath on my cheek, I didn't flinch. I didn't push him away. I didn't say a single word, and my silence was all the permission he needed. What followed wasn't a whirlwind of passion. It was slow, quiet, and filled with a terrifying sort of reverence. He reached out and touched my hair, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle. My body stiffened, not from fear, but from a jolt of something I hadn't felt in years. He whispered my name, and my silence was my answer. He slid closer on the bed, his hand moving from my hair to my shoulder, the warmth of his palm seeping through my thin t-shirt. I remember thinking, this is wrong, this is a sin. But the voice of reason was a faint whisper behind the roaring thunder of my own buried needs. He leaned his forehead against mine, and for a long moment we just stayed like that, two broken people mourning different losses under the same roof. The encounter itself was quiet, careful, and deliberate, a physical manifestation of all the unspoken words between us. When it was over, he lay beside me on top of the covers for a long time, just staring at the ceiling. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, my heart feeling like it had been fundamentally and irrevocably reshaped. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up, and my mother was coughing in the dining room asking for water. Life went on, as if nothing had happened, but everything had. I wish I could say it was a one-time mistake born from grief and exhaustion, but when you are drowning, you'll breathe in anything that feels like air, even if it's poison. It happened again 3 nights later, and again a few nights after that. Our twisted intimacy became a silent routine. He never forced me. He didn't have to. I was a willing participant in my own destruction. During the day, he'd leave envelopes of cash on the kitchen counter, or small, unsettling gifts, a bottle of perfume, a delicate necklace. I never thanked him. I just took them, my silence a form of acceptance. Meanwhile, Mom got worse. The doctor started talking about hospice care, and the reality of my situation crashed down on me. While my mother was dying in the next room, I was sleeping with the man who was supposed to be her husband. I started avoiding mirrors. I couldn't stand to look at the girl staring back at me. Then one morning I threw up in the bathroom at work. I blamed it on stress. But it happened again the next day, and the day after that. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the box open. I locked myself in the bathroom and sat on the cold tile floor, praying. But the 2 pink lines that appeared were bright, clear, and unforgiving. I was 22 years old, and I was pregnant with my father's child. A secret of this magnitude can feel like a life sentence. How does a person even begin to find a path forward from such a dark place? We at Stoic Love believe that even in the most hopeless situations, the human spirit can endure. I didn't tell him right away. For days, I walked around in a daze, the secret a living, growing thing inside me. I'd watch him read the paper at the kitchen table while my mother slept, and I felt like the walls of our house were screaming. Finally, one night, I couldn't bear it anymore. He came to my room as usual, but I stopped him at the door. "I'm pregnant," I said, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion. He stood frozen in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Yes." He stepped inside and slowly closed the door behind him. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just sat on the edge of my bed and nodded, as if this were an outcome he had already considered. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay. We'll figure it out. You don't have to tell anyone. You don't have to tell anyone." That sentence, meant to be reassuring, was what finally made me snap. He wanted to bury this secret too, just like all the others. But I couldn't. I couldn't live with this thing inside me, kicking and growing and reminding me every single day of the choices I made, of the silence I kept. I look at my mother now, her body so frail, her breath so shallow, and I wonder what the truth would do to her. Would it kill her faster? Or does a part of her, a mother's intuition, already know that something has been terribly, terribly wrong under this roof for a very long time? This is my truth. This is my shame. And this is the unbearable burden I now have to carry. What happens next is a choice I am terrified to make. The weight of a secret like this is unimaginable, and the path forward is unclear. If you've been moved by Leah's story and want to know how she navigates this impossible situation, make sure you're subscribed to Stoic Love with notifications turned on. The conclusion to her story is one you will not want to miss.